Hi.
Hello.
But anyway, I'm Anthony.
Hello.
After all this time,
Yeah, it's a lot of years since I've my letter to you originally, which obviously I don't think you found, but yeah.
it's unfortunate because
Yeah.
I could have looked at it and I could have thought myself back into
Yeah, it's such a long
2002
time
or whatever it was.
things definitely, well, I would imagine, obviously I don't have little ones now, but I would imagine things are done very differently to how they were when my children were little. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, some things are light years better. Understanding of coercive control, all kinds of different factors, but depressingly some things are just the same and people's experience is just the same. So I think some's better, some's worse.
Can I put my picture up somewhere?
Yeah, of course. Would this be a good place?
Yeah, be a good place. I don't know how you guys want to do it. For me, I really just here to raise Joe's case, and that his whole life it shouldn't have been like it was, and considering he had technically a lot of professionals should have been involved with his life. He should still be here today, and I personally feel that that's the reason he's not here today. I feel that had I not had the interference, and I will call it interference because that's how I see it, Joe would still be here today, and I feel very strongly about that.
How old would he be today?
Joe, he was 22 when he died, and that would be 5 years in August, so yeah, time's passing very quickly. It feels like yesterday, but...
It must.
Yeah.
And on his birthday, do you
On his
celebrate?
birthday, yeah, we do. We do celebrate, and I go off down the river and let off some very loud fireworks, and we let balloons up. And
He looks a very beautiful child.
he was a very beautiful child. He had a lot of issues that probably would have been coming to light. He was 8. He would have been 8 in this photo. And during this period of Joe's life, I was only having 4 two-hour contacts a year. Well, I only ever had 4 two-hour contacts a year. But his learning disability, ADHD, undiagnosed, whatever, I felt it was autism, but created a lot of issues for Joe. And it wasn't so bad for him when he was in foster care because he would have had routine and structure in place. He went to a special school. But once that placement broke down, and when Joe became older and wanted to become independent, there was nothing in place for that. There should have been transition into some better accommodation.
Do you think his care was autism friendly at different points in his life?
Absolutely not. Joe had been diagnosed ADHD, and I've also heard medication being mentioned, but Joe was never on any medication ever. And as far as the ADHD diagnosis, I don't know where that came from, when that was, and if it was, why didn't I know? My experience is that Joe didn't have any input with regards to a learning disability, and other than being at a special school. And then when he came to start to live independently, that's when it became the issue. And I felt as a mum, nothing was going to change unless we could get this diagnosis in place, and then doors would open and the right support might fall into place. And that's really where I started with things with Joe, along with trying to change the accommodation that he was living at, because that was always an ongoing issue. This accommodation wasn't right, and while you're waiting for a diagnosis, things are going on, he's being bullied, we need to get him moved, he's left. And all of that while I'm trying to build up a relationship with Joe, because
After the gap.
For that many years, from him being 5 to 15, I had 4 two-hour contacts a year, and that's not many hours. And they were supervised as well in a supervised place. That's not Joe was 18 months when he left my care, so he wouldn't have ever remembered me as a mum, or I never had that mothering. I always felt Joe's mum, but he wouldn't have felt it, if you see what I mean. And we never had that mother-son relationship, and that's what I was always trying to get.
So who was his main attachment?
Me, when once he left foster care, because I was that one thing that was always going to be there, if you see what I mean. It didn't matter what he did, you know what I mean? I'm mum.
And did he ask you questions about what happened between 5 and 15, or did you tell him? How did that go?
He never asked anything about anything like that, to be honest with you. I know he was very inquisitive about his dad. Probably because he probably didn't have many memories of actually the years living with his dad. But the impact of that, certainly for his brother, would have been big. So Joe would have been quite inquisitive about that.
So what's your relationship with the care system, looking back?
I didn't have a relationship with the care system. It was an us and them, a me and them. That's how it was. And I was just thinking when I was sitting in that room out there, how different it feels walking in here today, where I feel that people have some compassion towards me, whereas before it used to feel like, the meetings were always lack reviews and things like that. I always felt looked down upon. I had to fight for
anybody in particular, or the
whole
group as a whole?
I always felt hated by social services, and I know that sounds ridiculous because it's an organisation, and I some people said I've got a chip on my shoulder and things like that. But when I met my partner, who I'm with, and I've been with for 15 years now, and he came into my life, and Josh and Joe would have been. Joe was about 13, 12, and Josh 2 years older. And I was still, by that time, I'd changed my life. I was the manager of a shop, working full time, renting my own accommodation, etc., etc. Still only getting 4 2-hour contacts a year with these guys. My partner attended some of the meetings with me, and he just said to me, I just don't understand why they treat you the way they do and why they look at you the way they seem to look at you. There was never any, like I said, 4 2-hour contacts a year. It was always supervised. In all those years, it was always supervised. I went into drug use after my boys were taken to cope, to deal with.
That was the cause, in effect.
That was why they were never returned to me. The reason the boys were taken from me, as far as I still don't really understand, was because my bar of being a parent, I set it too high. And I was too hard on myself at parenting, and I criticised myself. Nobody at any point said, you're doing okay, Sam, actually. You're on your own here. You've got 2 little boys. You just come out of an abusive relationship. Josh was already showing signs of ADHD. And I was struggling. I reached out. And I didn't get...
Did you get help before it started to deteriorate? Was there any period when you were helped to keep them?
No, I don't really feel so.
Was there a particular worker who you felt close to, who understood you?
No, the only one worker that sticks out in my mind was the one who came in, and I can remember coming around my house that day and saying, they'd already got Josh, he was in respite care. We're going to take Joe as well, because I'd reunited with their dad. When I was apart from him, I had mentioned that he'd been violent to me, and that was kind of where it started. His acceptance of violence as being normal and wanting to get back into a relationship with him. It was, we're going to take the children. I put them on the at-risk register and we're going to take them. So I went to live at my mum's for 3 months while we were assessed as parents.
At that moment when the children were taken, we try to now teach staff, even in these really fraught situations, to be compassionate, sensitive, to give full explanations, to give a lead-in time, all those things. What was What actually happened when they were taken? Was it a...
They weren't taken in the end. I stopped them from being taken by saying, what can I do to stop this? And it was originally only meant to be one night. I don't know where that came from, but I was told if I went to stay at my mum's, and my mum took responsibility for the children, but they had to be in her sight at all times, then they wouldn't take them.
So you agreed to that?
Absolutely, I agreed to that, 100%, to
So
keep my
what
children.
then happened?
I went over to my mum's and I was there for 3 months while I was assessed, court orders, people coming in and assessing us as parents, and the children still weren't allowed to be out of my mum's sight at any time. We went through the process. You know, we found out that the assessment, it was fine. We were considered normal parents and we were going to be allowed to go home. We were just waiting for the final court hearing. Joe's dad left me, and I was there on my own at my mum's, and I was there, now what's going to happen? And we had a meeting at social services, and they said, look, you can still go home, but we'll put a package of support together, you know, to make sure everything goes okay, because now you're on your own. And Joe's dad was a disciplinarian, and that was probably why I got back with him, because I struggled to discipline the children. I didn't agree with smacking. I don't agree with those things, and they didn't listen to me. But he just had to look at them.
What do you say to professionals who say, well, you must have done some really awful things to the kids for them to be removed? Because how could they be removed from you?
There was one thing I did.
Yeah.
After they came in, we had this meeting of package of support that was going to be put in place, which would include child minding, respite care, but there was a condition to that. That was that the children knew and had met the people that they were going to stay with overnight. I didn't want them going to strangers. That wouldn't give me a break at all. I would have just panicked and worried. The child minding came along straight away. The respite care didn't appear. I started struggling. I was on my own. I'd gone from being at my mum's to just being on my own. I started struggling with the discipline, with Josh's behaviours, him being naughty. I started feeling I was failing, and I honestly felt I was going to snap. I wasn't getting sleep. And I started ringing and asking when I was going to get this respite care. Where's this package of support that you promised me? And I would leave her urgent messages. I would ring and say, I need to speak to her urgently. None of these calls were answered. I would sit there just like, what is important? What matters? When are you going to help me? When are you going to step in? What have I got to do here? And the children were at the childminders, and I just pushed and went over the edge. And I rang up and said, I'd want to leave a message and just tell her I've killed my children, and put the phone down. And I was just, it was a really stupid thing to do, but at the time I was like, what have I got to do here? Is that what people are pushed to? And of course, somebody rang me back straight away, and I said, "Oh, that's where it is. That's where what I've got to do. I'm not going to do that. But the children aren't even here."
And was that taken seriously when you said that?
Yeah, my children were taken from me.
So that was the threat
that was
that
the catalyst
triggered.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you said, "Look, I was just saying that to get your attention, and because I was desperate for help," what was the reaction?
Well, I don't remember. All I remember is immediately some respite being put in place, offering me some respite. The children can go tonight. And I refused, because I said that's not what we agreed with. We agreed that the children could go and see the people, get to know them a little bit, you know, but they wanted them to go straight away. And I wouldn't agree to it. I couldn't give you time scales on this, but this would have been over a period of either that day or over a period of a couple of days. Somebody then came and said they're going to Joe's dad's. And if you don't sign to say they can go, we'll get a court order. After he left, this was 10 months earlier he left, and he had no contact at all. He hadn't seen, he hadn't rung, that was it. I hadn't seen him at all for 10 months. So obviously you can understand I didn't want them going there, but I had no choice, and they went. And they never come back. They never came back. Because he would have been saying, well, you know, I don't have all the problems that she does. I can cope with the children, blah, blah, blah. I assume that's why, I don't know. But anyway, they never came back.
So you went downhill after that.
Yeah.
When did you start to recover? And how did you recover? Did you get support to recover?
No.
Did you just determine to do that on your own for a reason?
The biggest problem that I had would have made me better was having my children back. Nobody would give me my children back because they considered me a drug user, and that was all they was focused on, was my drug problem, my drug problem, my drug problem. Now, my drug problem was because I didn't have my children, and I wasn't offered any support for any of that. They were always suspicious of me, you know, when I turned up at the family centres to see the children. There was always things put in place. It was always, everything was focused around drug use.
So you feel you weren't seen as a person?
No, absolutely
and as a
not.
mother,
No.
but as a drug user who was in love with the drug.
Yeah,
not,
I put the
not
drugs
your
before my
children.
children. And it suddenly became, that's why my children were taken. When there was nothing to do with that. I started using drugs to cope with the fact I didn't have my children, because it just made me comfortably numb. You know, and when I wasn't with my children, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted my children, just wanted to be a mum. And I was only a mum when my children were with me. Joe's dad was also a drug user, which wasn't an issue. He'd been on a methadone script, a long-term methadone script, when my children were taken with me and placed with him.
So why do you think you were, if you were both drug users, you were defined as a drug user and he wasn't?
I don't know, that's one of my questions. I don't know. That's always been one of my issues, that he'd already been to prison and served 2 years for dealing heroin when my children were taken from my care and placed with him. He was on a maintenance methadone script. None of those things were picked up. He wasn't monitored on urine samples or anything like that. Yet me, everything was about...
So was it because he wasn't you?
Well, that's what it feels like, because he had my children for 4 years, and his drug use got considerably worse because he then started using, I could see the children if I gave him drugs, which kept me using and me supporting his habit. In a way, it was acceptable to me because my children had been moved across the road from my house. Not only was, you know, they given to him, but they gave him a house, literally a flat, and the road opposite me. And this whole of Ipswich, they had to give it opposite my road. So I got to see him taking the children to school every day, which was pretty difficult. Go over and see them when I wanted, as long as I gave him drugs, outside of the contact sessions that I had, which obviously we kept between ourselves.
And during that period, did a social worker keep in touch? And
with me?
Yeah.
No, I never had any contact with social
workers
at all.
I think that's a little bit different today, with more keeping in touch rather than just...
The only contact I had with social service was if I was criticised over a contact session. I really struggled when their dad came to pick them up, because I knew that the children were struggling at his.
So it was deficit-based work, not strengths-based. If you did something
wrong, absolutely, yeah. His discipline methods were awful. He was abusive. He neglected the children. Joe was his child. Josh wasn't. So obviously that's one of my biggest questions. How on earth did he end up with my child and not his child? But he did. Josh took a lot of abuse from Joe's dad, a lot of abuse. And during that 4-year period, I was constantly highlighting issues that were going on there. One time I went round to visit him and Josh came to sit on my lap, and I thought he'd got faeces on his bottom. So I took him to the toilet and it was bruising, all bruising. When I left, I had a big dilemma. What do I do? Do I contact social service and they'll find out I've been seeing the children out of my sessions? He'll find out and he'll probably batter me, because he lived just across the road and worked out how to get into my house and constantly did that. Or do I let it go? And I just needed to know my children were safe, so I reported it. And the children got taken down to the police station, and he got reprimanded for over-disciplining the children. That was it, and obviously I got punished through that. I wasn't allowed to see them for a period of time. It was all just, me trying to highlight, look what's going on here. And I would highlight that the children are at home on their own. The children are at home on their own. All I got told is, we know. But when we go round there, he's told them not to answer the door. My answer is, keep the door in then, If you know my children are in there on their own, he just seemed to be able to do anything and just get away with it. He took them down to Tower Street when you guys were at Tower Street because he wanted some drugs, money for drugs. He took the children down and demanded some money. He wanted some money. No, he was offered electric credit or food vouchers. And he said, I don't want that, I want money. And if you don't give me money, I'm going to leave the children here. And he walked out, leaving my 2 little boys in Tower Street. Just left them there. They were putting their coats and their scarves on while he's walking out the door. And what happened? They put him in respite care for a weekend and give him back to him. How does that happen? You know, this is somebody who I'm ringing to say, please help me with my children. I need some help here. And you've got somebody who deals with it like that. And I don't
I can see
understand.
why you feel the way you feel. You're a mother who was struggling periodically, lived with a violent guy, struggled at times with coping, but could have responded to support. That's very different
Yeah.
from somebody who had no capacity to look after
Absolutely.
their children.
Yeah.
What could you have done differently? Because you're saying professionals should have done
What could I have done
things
differently?
to avoid what happened.
I don't know what I could have done differently because I asked for help, you know, I kept asking for help. I just criticised myself all the time and my parenting, you know, I wanted to be better, you know what I mean? I shouldn't have been so hard on myself because I wasn't, you know, I provided them a wonderful home, a lovely home, they had everything they wanted. I loved them, I cared for them, I taught them, played with them. It was just the struggling with the discipline, and that's where I needed the support. I don't know what I could have done differently because I reached out and asked for help. I just feel that I wasn't given it, and instead of giving help, I was criticised. And when maybe I could have been offered, you know, reassurance. You know, you're not that bad. You know, just a bit of reassurance maybe, and then when they took the children,
Well, and now there
maybe,
are edge of care services and a lot more help going in to avoid children going into care.
maybe my drug use shouldn't have been such a major issue, you know, because it wasn't the reason the children were taken. You know, I don't feel I would have ever put drugs before my children. Obviously, by the time, you know, things got really bad, I had a habit to support. And that isn't an easy thing. And I'm not proud of some of the things I did to support it. But I was also very reckless. You know, once my children were taken, I really was
Gave up.
incredibly reckless. And I didn't really want to be here at all. But I felt I had to be because I had children, you know. And if I wasn't here, who was going to oversee the abuse that they were suffering over the road?
If you fast forward then to the tragedy and what led up to that, what do you feel now?
I just, you know, I wish that over the years, if Joe and I had been able to have a better relationship, you know, if we hadn't had 4 stupid bloody 2-hour contacts a year and we'd been able to form some sort of relationship, there was no bridge building done there.
No
you know?
restorative
No.
practice to repair the relationship?
There wasn't really a relationship, you know, there wasn't really a
Because you've been
relationship.
separated so long.
Yeah, and there was, you know, we were just left to our own devices, you know. Once he became independent, it was get on with it, you know. And luckily Joe did reach out to me because I suppose he didn't really have anyone else to. You know, I was always there for him, and I tried to have him at mine, you know, a few times, but that was very difficult. You know, Joe's learning disability, his want to be independent, he's constant putting himself in dangerous situations. He wanted to be independent, and he had a right to be independent, you know.
So it was too late?
Yeah, if we'd had some help with our relationship over the years.
So in those last conversations you had with him, what did you and he talk about?
We disagreed a lot on where he should be living. I wanted him to be in somewhere more that had sort of 24-hour support staff. Obviously, I just wanted him to have a meaningful life, you know, where he could go out and enjoy his life, maybe have a little job, you know, not bumming around. I felt that his life was only going one way, around the people that he was around, because he was so vulnerable, being coerced and forms of all sorts of abuse, which he did and would have experienced. I wanted Joe away from all of that. I don't think Joe was really aware of what was available out there for him. You know, I was, because I started working in the system and, you know, became fully aware of the types of placements there were out there, you know, that he didn't have to be locked in, or, you know, that he could have independence.
Could get 24/7 support but still be independent.
Yeah, absolutely. But he was, the only places that he had that had staff on site were places that had, you know, people that had just come out from prison, and he needed to be around people with learning disabilities, not mental health, drug addiction. Should not have been around those type of people. If he'd have been around other people with learning disabilities, he would have been able to make friends.
So at that time, what were your worst fears?
To be honest with you, I thought he was going to end up in prison. You know, he was bullied so much, and I mean, every time I would see Joe, he would been jumped. You know, I've never been jumped in my life, but Joe was jumped 2 or 3 times a week. It was just something that he was so used to. I can't imagine what his life was like, just being bullied as much as he was, and there were people that weren't suitable and they took advantage of him in one form or another, whether it be money, whether it be taking his clothes, borrowing his PlayStation and not giving it back. Just, it was constant, And when Joe died, all I got from his room was a bag with a dirty towel, some dirty socks and a dirty t-shirt, a grinder and a lighter. That was it. He had everything. I made sure, I can't tell you the amount of tellies I replaced, the amount of games consoles over the years I replaced. Don't get me wrong, Joe sometimes probably would sell them, you know, or he would have given them to somebody tick for some, you know, but he would have been exploited in that situation, you know. There was a time when he lived at Anglesey Heights and I found his telly wasn't in his room. Where's your telly, Joe? Oh, it's in the room downstairs. What's it doing down there? And I rang the staff up and, you know, said, why is his telly down there? Oh, we can't get involved in situations like that. We know it shouldn't be in there, but we can't get involved. So I went round and took a couple of people with me, and we went downstairs and opened the door and took the telly and put it back in Joe's room. And I then contacted the police and said, you can come round now. The receipt's on my table to prove that I paid for that television. You know, there was a lot of that. I was having to do a lot of that for Joe as well, which he shouldn't have been. He shouldn't have had to
Have been in those settings.
No, and it was just from one to another, you know. And he was at risk of people were getting him to sell drugs, and thankfully Joe wasn't interested in the harder drugs. He did get introduced to weed, and it might have helped with Joe's learning disability. It might have helped to relax him with ADHD or whatever, I don't know. But I felt it was an acceptance of being in with people. You know, as long as he'd got weed, he could go and sit and, you know, chill with somebody, and Joe liked to be around people.
At that time, the professionals did a lot of work with him, or spent a lot of time on his case, both the children in care teams and then the transition team. What do you think the impact of that professional help was?
I'm not sure what you mean. They did a lot of work around the, sorry?
Well, they talk about working intensively with him, and
Did they?
that he was
That must have been when
certainly
I wasn't
wasn't
with him then.
abandoned. But what do you think from your conversations with him?
My conversations with him was, he was supposed to have a phone call once a week. That was it, just a phone call once a week. And more often than not, Joe was forced to make that phone call because he wouldn't receive that phone call. Time he would adopt a lot of the things that I would say, and I'd heard him on the phone, you know, using phrases that he'd heard me use. Probably didn't understand them, but he'd heard me say, I'm vulnerable, I'm really vulnerable, do you know what I mean? He'd heard me say that, you know. He would have understood it after a while.
And he was, I guess.
He was, but he learnt to say things like that. But there were things he probably was said that he didn't really understand, that he'd heard me say, perhaps, when he was fighting for himself. And he was fighting for himself. He was trying to.
Yeah.
He was trying to.
And you've talked a lot about what you've learnt, and how you were trying to be a good mother throughout, even though it was tough. And
there was a lot of times
what do you
we
think
didn't get
the learning for professionals is about what they didn't do? Because our work is mostly about learning from what goes wrong to make things right for others.
The biggest thing I felt was it was us, me and them. There was no, we were all here for Joe, you know. We was
No
all,
co-production.
No, none, absolutely. It was them and me. So you know, foster cares and me. We weren't really on the same. That's what it felt like at all the LAC reviews and everything. You know, we were all here for Joe and Josh at the time. There was no working with me. How, you know, we should have all been working together to help Joe. There was none of that, you know. And there was times when Joe was maybe homeless and he'd come to stay at mine, and I would just be constantly, you know, on the phone. Where are you going to find Joe somewhere to live? You know, this is breaking down here, you know. And he's only here because the other alternative is a park bench. You know, this is not what Joe wants. He didn't want. You got to understand as well that he didn't really see me as a proper mum. You know, he was trying to, but it was really difficult, you know.
Is there anything you'd like to say that we haven't?
I don't know how things are today. Obviously, I don't have children in the system. You know,
There are more children in care than ever before.
Yeah, I would.
That's going up.
Yeah.
There are more parents on the poverty line, more parents using drugs.
Yeah.
More children with learning difficulties.
Yeah.
More children with
believe
autism.
that. Yeah.
And
100%
more
believe
young people that we're worried about in Suffolk who are always in between and highly vulnerable and at risk.
Yeah, I can believe that, and I wouldn't want to be a parent of young children today. I'm a grandparent. I've got 3 grandchildren, and
How old are they?
the youngest is 7, the middle one who's autistic is 9, and the oldest is 13, and he's just been excluded. I wouldn't want to face the challenges that parents face today with, you know, social media, the internet. It's different raising children today, you know. They're just stuck to...
Yeah. But now you're in a stable relationship.
Yeah, very stable.
Looking at your daughter's video,
I want to talk about my experiences as Sam's daughter and what being her daughter has felt like over the years. Now, growing up, I lived with my dad, but from a young age, I can just remember wanting to live with my mum. Wanting my mum so bad it hurt. And the reason I wanted my mum was because she was an amazing mum. She gave me all her love and attention, Anything I wanted to do, she would do. If I wanted to play a game, she'll play the game. If I want to do drawing, she'll do drawing. If I want to learn how to do this, she'll do that with me. She spent every waking minute with me and my brothers, doing whatever we wanted to do. You know, she kept us clean. She kept us well clothed. I mean, clean to the point that I remember her making sure we would dry in between our toes, and to sort of demonstrate how amazing she was as a mum. I mean, these are just a few bits that I've got out of my box from upstairs. This was a baby diary that my mum filled in. We all had one of these. This is my one. And I'll just take this off briefly. As you can see, looking very old now. Tapes of me talking and my first words in here. My first lock of hair. Teeth, my milk teeth, my baby teeth. My belly button cord, bands from hospital, my scan picture. So as you can see, it's childlike writing, and it says, "To Mummy, I love you very much. That I wish I was living with you. I miss seeing you. I feel very upset. I will always love you. Love for me to you. Your is forever."
you've got very close family. How do you see your next 10 years, 20 years?
I don't know, I just carry on as I am. I've got a job that I love. I'm massively involved with my grandchildren, you know, and they come and stay a lot. Nanny is massively involved in their lives, and I always would have been, and you know, and I always will be. And I'm still mum. So, you know, my children don't need me quite as much as they did, but I still have children out there that one day will come looking for me, hopefully, that are still in the system. not so young anymore. They're reaching age of potentially wanting to reach out. So I don't know what the next 10 years is going to, you know, tomorrow I could get a little thing pop up on Facebook saying, I'm your daughter, I'm your son. I don't know, it's happened.
And are your
We've
relationships
scared.
with professionals, when you have them, better now?
When you say we're professionals, in what respect?
Well, you've talked about grandchildren and Josh
Yeah, because they
having
don't.
contact with schools and so on.
Yeah, because I feel they don't know me as, you know what I mean? They don't know that person. You know,
That person is
yeah,
long
they
time
don't
ago.
connect that. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't. I get on fine with people, and you know, I mean, in my job, it's a professional role. You know, I deal with professionals a lot. I don't have an issue getting on with MPs, councillors. I never have had. It was just social services, to be honest with you, unfortunately, because they were a massive part of my life and my children's life, unfortunately.
Okay, I think we'll take a pause, but I think probably that is
Yeah.
your story. Amazingly frank, articulate, powerful.
Right now, I feel if it helps anybody and can change things and prevent anybody ending up how Joe ended up, or, you know, I live with this every day of my life, you know. And to be honest with you, my life has felt like it stopped and changed the minute my boys were taken. Everything changed from that point. It's like, in a way, 2 lives, well, 3 lives, because it changed the minute Joe died as well. Yeah, my life was different, and it was all just about fighting for them and trying to get them back, or trying to get contact with them, or trying to get answers.
I think it will help other parents because you were always trying to get back in and
Yeah.
to stay in. And so the prevention is for parents who are at the point of
Yeah.
losing their children,
Yeah,
whatever it takes to not
Yeah.
let that happen.
Yeah.
Because once it happens,
yeah,
it's harder to get back.
yeah. And sometimes you don't. I
Sometimes you
didn't.
don't. But it sounds like you've got a perspective on it now.
I have, but I lost my son. I'm never going to get Joe back. You know, Josh is here. Josh is here, and you know, we don't have the relationship that we would have had I have raised him. We don't. And I can't change that.
No.
He's a different person than he would have been had I've raised him. We do have a lot of contact, but it's not. We're not as close as you know what I mean, as I would like. But a lot of that comes through. He doesn't live in Ipswich. He lives in Cambridge, so you know, it's not quite as easy to see each other and what have you. But yeah, we're still close, but not quite as close as I'd like to be. But.